I'd like to formally welcome everyone to our webinar, which is 7 ideas to improve your quality management, a very popular topic. Delighted to introduce our 2 speakers to you. First of all, welcome to Duncan White from Horizon 2.
Hello.
And Duncan, you're currently setting up a quality management for your consultant. You're setting up a quality management program for a French bank.
Well, as part of that, yes, quality management. It's a bank that's trying to deliver a premium service in the French digital bank market. So yes, quality of interaction is very important. But we are actually starting the whole thing from scratch. So it's we are outsourcing the contact center actually, which is quite interesting for a startup. And I say going live at the end of September, but no idea on call volumes, demand patterns, anything really. So,
so interesting time. So Duncan, you're going to be talking through 4 ideas on improving quality management, and Frank, you're going to be looking from a technology angle about some of the ways that technology can help improve quality management.
Absolutely, yeah, and it won't be a technical-led technology piece, but yeah, I'll certainly be talking about how to use technology across multiple channels to improve, business performance and provide more effective feedback to agents.
And if you want to watch a replay, that will be available later on this afternoon, callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. And if you're not already logged into our chat room, in the chat room, we've got a large number of people already logged in. callcenterhelper.com/chat, very straightforward. You'll need to put it in another window and watch the slides on a separate window. We've not been able to get the 2 systems integrated. And once you're logged into the chat room, one of the big advantages of doing that is that you can download the webinar slides from within the chat room. We will be going through a lot of detail and things that perhaps you will want to share with your team. So it's a good idea to have those slides. So it's callcenterhelper.com/chat. There is an added advantage. If you've got any questions or any tips, you can pose those both of our speakers and of the audience in the chat room. And there is a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for the best tip, which we'll be calling at the end of the webinar. There's the bottle of champagne. It is a rather nice fruit reserve, so which is very good. So if you'd like to log into the chat room, it would be great to do that. So we're going to start off today with a poll, and we'd just like to explore which channels it is that you operate today, because we'll be looking at how quality management later might vary across different channels. So it'd be interesting to see in the audience, which channels do you operate today? Do you operate voice? Do you operate email, web chat, social, or do you have other channels that you operate, for instance, video or post? If there's other channels you want to put, you can put those details into the chat room. So which channels do you currently operate? Duncan, do you expect web chat to be very prevalent?
Well, yes, you would hope so. The thing I was going to say, actually, we set up a QM program for a face-to-face operation once, where they had like 3 advice centres. It was for a local council that was set up 3 advice centres around their patch, and we videoed. We had selective videoing of people turning up and asking for information, which I don't know whether that will come in under the other channels, but yes, web chat. You would hope. I think I'm a big fan. I think everyone's a big fan of web chat, both in terms of experience and in terms of costs. So yeah, I would hope so.
So looking at the results that come back, we've got 91% saying voice, very, very narrowly behind that, 89% email, 39% web chat, 41% social media, and 22% other. Other seems to take in correspondence. Back office is another one that's built in as a channel there as well. So we haven't seen a video response there. So
I'm surprised that social is more than web chat, actually.
Yeah, that surprises me that social's higher than web chat. I mean, the voice being the predominant channel doesn't surprise me. Email being second doesn't necessarily surprise me. I would have thought that social and web chat might be switched in order.
Yeah, I would expect web chat to be higher. But, although you didn't necessarily ask whether it was for customer service, Jonty, did you?
No, we didn't. But interesting to see that. Certainly, the social one. I guess it's one that you can't ignore, and so people naturally fall into it. With web chat, you often do require some new technology to make that work. Okay. So, in terms of the agenda, now is a good time to hand the baton across to Duncan White from Horizon 2, and if you'd like to share your ideas on how to improve web chat, let's just.
Okay.
Move across the baton to you. Over to you, Duncan.
Thank you. Okay, can you see my screen? Is that?
We can indeed, yeah.
Seamless change, as they say. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone. As you're aware, my name is Duncan White. The company is Horizon 2. We are a customer management consultancy, and in one shape or another have helped people understand the impact of communication on customer behavior since about 2001, 2002. So when we started, it was all voice. In fact, when we started, it was all outbound voice that we were looking at and looking to see how you could actually change advisor behavior to help them sell more. So it was a big driver in the contact center world. Since then, we've been through a number of different iterations, and we've broadened out both in terms of scope and in terms of channel. So, as I said, we've done face-to-face through to social media. And it's all about helping organisations understand how to do things better. So, some of the topics that I'm going to talk about are they might come across as quite theoretical, but we've used all of them to help people achieve improvement in contact centres. And if I remember, at each step, I will tell you how we've done that and the impact that it's had. Okay, so the first slide, those of you who might have seen me talking before may have seen this or elements of this before. But Peter Drucker, well-known management author, there's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all, which is a slightly convoluted way of saying, actually, there's no point in doing something well if it's not actually having any impact on what you're doing. And quality management can sort of fall into this. We said earlier on when we were chatting that things haven't really changed necessarily over 20 years, and a lot of people are still using manual call listening or contact scoring as a driver for or as a source of quality management opportunities. So just to give you some statistics around this, if you say an average agent takes about 1,200 calls a month. If you sample 8 calls over the course of that month for that agent, and you're rating them on a 10-point scale from 0 to 9, the stats calculation behind that tells us that at the end of that month, if you give that agent a score, that score is representative of the score you would have given them if you'd listened to all of their calls, but there is quite a wide margin of error. So what you're saying is if I score you a 5 on your 8 calls in the month, then there's the chances that that agent has scored a 5 over all the calls that he's done in the month ranges from, there's a 34.5% margin of error. So in fact, the true figure will lie somewhere between 1.5 and 8.5. So yeah, there's not, and this can vary depending on the number of calls that you listen to per month. So this is a good point, I think, to start our initial poll, our first poll, and actually find out from you how many calls per agent per month do you currently evaluate. Are you operating the poll? Yes, you are. Okay. So,
so how many calls per agent per month are you operating? 2, 4 or more, 7.7%. Do you monitor every call or do you monitor none of them? So just like to vote on that. We've got the bulk of the people voted here. Let's just close this sample size of 81. So I'll just share the results. 13% of the audience are monitoring 2 calls, 76% are doing 4 or more, 6% are doing 7.7%, 2% doing all of them, and 4% none of them. So any great surprises there, Duncan?
No, I don't think so. I think most people tend to do 4 or 6. I think from the people that I see, and for very good reason. You know, it's a difficult thing to do manually anymore, and it's incredibly time consuming. But the reason I was asking that is actually continuing this theme. If you only rate 4 calls per agent per month, then your margin of error increases from that 34.5% to 48.9%. Yeah, so that means your score of 5 is actually somewhere between 1.1 and 8.9. So a bit of quick mental arithmetic. So a huge margin of error. You know, if you're doing 2 calls a month, there were a few that were doing 2 calls of agent per month. Your margin of error is actually plus or minus 69.3%, which is bigger than the scale itself. So you could argue if you're only doing 2 calls per agent per month, you are in fact wasting your time, because it's not giving you anything representative about the agents that you're trying to score. The reason we had 7.7%, so if you need to get to a point where you have a confidence level of plus or minus 10%, to be confident the score is 5 is really somewhere between 4 and 6. You need to listen to or score 89 calls per agent per month, or 7.7% of their calls, which, you know, as I was just saying, is a very difficult thing to achieve if you're only doing manual scoring, and if you're trying to spread that across an entire agent population, particularly if you have a large contact center. Sorry, when I said 2 calls per agent per month, you may as well not bother. That's slightly tongue-in-cheek, because I remember a big telecoms company dropping agent scoring back in the early 2000s, 2004, 2005, and as soon as people knew they weren't being monitored at all, then performance just dropped off the edge of a cliff. So I'm not suggesting that you don't do anything. I'm just saying if you're using it as a way, and I would guess as an agent you would feel right to be aggrieved that your performance over a month is being judged on a method that isn't statistically valid and therefore unrepresentative of what you're doing, is something to bear in mind. Having said that, sampling theory you can use, but at a much less granular level. So if you're trying to find out about the performance of an operation or the performance of all your contact centers, then actually, if you structure your sample properly, randomly, then with a sample of 400 calls, you get a margin of error plus or minus 5%, but at an operational level. So I think the takeaway here is that, yes, you can learn a lot from listening to calls, but actually as a mechanism for scoring individual agents, it's probably not the best. So another quote from somebody else, and you've probably heard this one as well, that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the results to be different. So, and this is one, again, earlier in the conversation we were saying I'm surprised that QM maybe hasn't evolved a bit quicker or a bit more than it has over the last 20 years, because in a way some things are still very similar to how they have always been, and therefore the results are not going to be different. So idea 1 is a very simple one. You need to find a way of evaluating more calls or of tweaking the calls that you're listening to. So either, instead of trying to do it specifically across all your agent population, either find ways to improve the effectiveness of your sample distribution, so weight by agents who may be are newer or need more coaching, or who've been with you a long time and therefore need more coaching, or by call type, or by outcome, or by use customer feedback maybe, and listen to calls that are being scored externally, affected by your customers, although there are, for me, slight problems around that. You can use call recording metadata if you're recording your calls to find calls that you think you should be listening to, or you can use dynamic sampling to vary QA by agent, again, which is a variation on point 1, and you actually focus your QM on the agents that need greater support. Having said that, there's also an argument you do need to focus on the people who are doing well, because that's where you learn a lot about how your calls should maybe be done better. So you can't ignore the top performers. Partly, the purpose for this webinar, interaction analytics can obviously help. One good thing about, or one of the many good things about automation, is that it can handle large volumes of calls and do it very effectively and very economically. So whether you use that to prioritize calls that you then need to listen to manually, or to analyze 100% of your calls by agent, by team, by operation. There is technology that will enable you to do that, and you can compare and contrast across your digital channels. So if you've got multi-channels, voice, emails, social media, and web chat, then a well set up interaction analytic capability will enable you to tell you how those various channels are performing. Okay, idea 2 is quality needs to focus on other outcomes rather than just compliance. And there are, a good conversation. This is our methodology. It's a 6 outcome methodology. It says a good conversation has a number of different outcomes. When we started 20 years ago, we were looking at, a quality conversation was one around what's it like for the customer. So very much looking at customer experience. Now, as our methodology evolved, you actually realize there are a number of different outcomes. The big 3 are the customer, business, and the efficiency outcomes. So we're still looking at what's the level of customer experience, what's the impact on the customer's behavior, is it encouraging repeat purchase, is it encouraging increased lifetime value, which sort of goes into the business outcome as well. So are your calls delivering value for your business? The business, contact center costs a lot of money to set up, and the business has certain aims and goals for the contact center. So how well are those conversations delivering against those outcomes? And thirdly, the third big one is efficiency. As I said, they're expensive things, contact centers. Are there ways that you could be handling your inbound contact, your outbound contact better without impacting necessarily on the customer experience or on the business outcomes? The other 3 are all things we always look at, and also efficiency is very often a kick-off place for looking at digital channels. So voice, as you will be aware, is the most expensive channel. So are there changes that you can make that will change customer behavior to start using either self-help or the slightly less expensive digital channels? You also need to look at the impact of the conversations on your employees. Is it driving unauthorized absence, high levels of attrition? Insight, obviously, conversations are one of the primary contact channels between you and your customers. They're telling you what they think about you. They're telling you what they think about your products, your competitors, your service. You should be mining that regularly as part of your QM program in order to help drive operational improvement. And lastly, regulation. Some of you will be operating in regulated markets, and the regulator will have a very specific idea of what quality means to them. And so what you need to do as a QM program is to balance, I guess, create a balanced scorecard, if you like, of each of these outcomes, and understand how you as a business should be changing your contacts in order to meet these outcomes. They're not, you can't necessarily turn them all up, to 10 or 11 and say, right, I want all of these to be good, because there is some natural tension between some of these outcomes. So a regulator, we did some stuff a while ago for PPI, payment protection insurance for those out of the UK. And by the time the regulator had finished with the conversation, they weren't actually making any sales at all. So there's a question of trying to balance the regulatory needs against the business effectiveness. So how do we sell more?
And I certainly think one of the challenges with quality I hear a lot is trying to get it away from just being a box ticking exercise of just, you've got to say these things. It doesn't really improve quality. It's just, effectively being compliant with the process.
Yes, and I think, and that's why, focus on outcomes rather than just compliance. Yes, I mean, and you're right, people use the term quality, can describe a vast range of different activities. And people often confuse exactly that. Did you say this? Did you say that? Did you say the other? Compliant tick is great, and to my mind, that's streets away from what a good QM program needs to be. So if you decide on the outcomes that you need to deliver through your contacts, you then need to look at the drivers of those outcomes. So, and that's where you start to, that's where you need to start building your evaluation process, is looking at the drivers that drive the right positive outcomes. So look at the drivers of positive outcomes, build those into your evaluation process. Get your data from wherever you can, and test and learn, try different things. Going back to the Einstein quote, if you do what you do, you get what you always got. So, try different areas to get data from. And the main point of this is actually, base your valuations on, or your evaluation forms on evidence rather than on hearsay or received wisdom. The big one always used to be at the beginning of the call the agent by their first name in order to establish empathy, which is complete nonsense. And sorry, not necessarily complete nonsense, but it doesn't necessarily drive the right sort of outcomes that you want. And there are all sorts of things that you need to drive down. So this is where analysis, one of the other things about technology is not just the ability to score agents, it's to give you the analysis that you need to start building some of these evaluation forms. We look at breaking down, people often measure customer satisfaction. We think you need to break that down into levels below that. So yes, you get overall customer satisfaction, but were they actually, what was it about the contact that drove that satisfaction? Were they satisfied with the agent, but dissatisfied with the process? Were they satisfied with the agent and the process, but the outcome from the call wasn't good? So, and they'll score you down on overall customer satisfaction. But if you're going to use this to drive better performance, you need to isolate the things that you can influence. So what is it the agent can influence? What is it? You might be able to influence the agent and the process. You might have problems with the outcomes. And this last one thing below that actually is a good example. The diagram on the right is a thing called judgmental heuristics. It's actually recognizing that people aren't entirely logical when they form perception of an experience. So as I said, this is one of those academic things that I was alluding to, that we have used this in a very large contact center actually, which was a technology, a broadband technical support contact center, and we were unable to change the outcome because they were using a third party. So this was handling all the customer service calls, but they were using a third party to deliver the repair or the solution. So we couldn't change the outcome at all. We just had to change the customer perception of the call with the agent and the process and the conversation. And just focusing on some certain key bits of the conversation, we managed to get CSAT up from 22% to 60-odd% or something without being able to change the outcome. So, this is why I say you need granularity. You need to understand what it is that's driving the outcomes that you're looking at. Idea 3, compare and contrast the channels. A conversation is still a conversation, whatever the channel that you're using. There is this difference between synchronous versus asynchronous communication. So typically synchronous is where the conversation is two-way at the same time. So telephone is a good example. Web chat, I think, is synchronous communication. Face-to-face is communication. And there are different expectations around synchronous channels than there are around asynchronous channels. And you need to understand what those expectations are and how you can structure your conversations in order to meet those expectations. Because a typical customer journey now will embrace more. People will start on your website, they might chat, they might phone you, they might email you, they might write a conventional mail to you. But more and more, a journey will consist of more than one channel. So if you can build your QM around journey analytics rather than purely contact analytics, then you're actually measuring the end-to-end journey of your customer, as opposed to looking from the outside in, as opposed to from the inside out. And for this reason, it's very important to monitor across channel and ensure consistency across channel. You might be doing telephone very well, but your web chat might be not quite so good. Your telephone channel might be on brand, your web chat might be not quite so much on brand. And the reason I mentioned that is because, and the reason for consistency, there is, and I don't know whether you've come across this, this theory of obliquity. I found that picture on Amazon. I actually read an article by John Kay about obliquity, about 2004, I think. But I found the book, so I can't recommend. Don't take this as any recommendation to buy the book. But if you can find the original article, it's very good. And the theory of obliquity actually is that goals are often best achieved when you pursue them indirectly. So if you're trying to drive down your average handle time, you need to look at the drivers of, or what AHT is a consequence of, rather than necessarily trying to target the end metric on its own. So in his original article, he was saying very often, the organizations, when they change from being or having a wider mission statement to focusing on shareholder value, actually their ability to deliver shareholder value drops from that point. And it's understanding, it goes back to this, the understanding distinction between intent and outcome. And that is central to Obliquity. So understand what the drivers are and how you can affect those in order to achieve the outcome you want, albeit indirectly. So certainly, if you want a link to the article, or if you want a copy of the article, actually I do have one, then just drop me an email. I can send you that, but very good reading. Idea 4, and I'm conscious that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed through this bit a little bit. If you look at the elements of a good conversation, so understand there is more than actually just the agent capability. We use the analogy of the components of a good song. You can have the pianist tune the piano. If you want to improve the song, you can either change the pianist or train the pianist. You can change the tune or you can change the piano. Similarly, in a contact center, the components of a good conversation are your agents, the conversation structure, so what you're asking them to deliver, and the environment in which they're having it. So where in the customer journey and the conversation is taking place. And you can change all of these, they're all within your remit to change, but it's a question of identifying the best lever to drive improvement. All these things in the background are cognitive biases, so it's how people behave. They don't realize that they behave that way, but it's how they do. So people aren't as rational as you might think they are. And a lot of the decision making is made by the unconscious brain rather than the conscious brain. There's a very good example here, which is, again, you've probably seen somewhere, it's the impact of choice architecture. And we've used this in outbound contact centers where they're either trying to sell more or collect more. The notion of this is how you present a choice changes the way that people behave. So the Economist famously did this trial where they offered the first sample was $59 for a web subscription or $125 for print plus web. The second offer, which they trialed, was the same as that, but with a third option put in the middle, which was print only, which was $125. The impact of that third choice was huge. The conversion rate for the print plus web went from 32% to 84%. So although people, so nearly 3 times increase, as it says there, so although people didn't actually buy, no one chose the new option, the print only option. The purpose of it is a decoy price, or I think they call it relativity or comparison bias. So people like to contrast and compare. So the purpose of the print only was purely to say that, look, what good value the print plus web option is, and just giving people, or understanding how people make choice and how you can influence it enables you to triple your conversion rates. As I said, we've used this in debt collection actually, so using the way that you present options to people in terms of how they can repay their debt, changing how you structure that, took their collection rate from 70% to 90% in the pound. So very real, nothing to do with agents, nothing to do with anything else, just changing the structure of the conversation or how you're doing it. And there's hundreds of different cognitive biases, and it's a fascinating area if you have time. But the point of this is you're trying to improve performance, you're trying to improve organizational performance. There are other elements within quality management than just agent skill and agent capability. System 1, System 2 thinking. So remember, the final slide, another saying is you don't fatten a pig just by weighing it. And remember, the purpose of quality management is to drive performance improvement. So there should be stuff coming out of your quality management program that is enabling you to drive change. If it isn't driving change, then it's not having value. Okay, so idea summary, there's no excuse for small samples anymore. You do need to either change how you're sampling or look to increase the sample size. Quality should be measured from the outside in, so look at the outcomes of the calls. What are these conversations delivering to your customers, to your organization, and what's it costing? Remember Obliquity, don't target metrics directly, look for the drivers of metrics, and you stand a much better chance of achieving them. And 4, there are other levers to change, to measure, to test, rather than just purely agent capability. Use cognitive bias. There's a lot of stuff around how these things can be used to change behavior. Use those in how you structure your conversations. Bonus point 1 is if you're scoring people on behavior, measure people to reward your agents on behavior and not on outcomes, particularly in a sales environment. We do some stuff for Virgin Money. Richard Branson's view was that actually if you get people doing the right things and reward them for doing the right things, eventually then the sales will come. An early adopter of Obliquity, Richard Branson. Bonus 2, if all this is too difficult, think about outsourcing your quality. There are people who will deliver quality on an outsourced basis, and you can then push them to deliver some of this stuff. Okay, that's me, John T.
Thank you very much for that, Duncan. A very comprehensive overview, and I love some of the academic research you've got built into that. We're going to jump across to Rachel on the chat room, who's been monitoring all the discussions, top tips, questions, and the like. So, Rachel, if we'd like to get your screen up, and we can see what's there we are. What's been going on in the chat room?
Yeah, lots of questions, and quite a few replies back from our original question, which was, what is the quality management program like in your contact center? And Stephanie said, we have a framework with a set of 6 questions, which is scored, a maximum score of 100. The team managers, leaders assess and score the work/calls and coach this back. We then have a quality team to support the managers to assess within the framework and stay within variance so it's fair and consistent. The downside is that managers and leaders tend to go through the assessment form rather than focusing on the coaching. So good feedback there. Mike's asked, we're looking to rebrand our QA department, and so asked, what do you call your quality team? Duncan, I don't know whether you've seen any good names or anything like that.
No, that's a very good question, actually. I remember a long time ago, we did some work with a credit card company, and they actually, gosh, I'm just trying to remember now, they spent a lot of time and effort actually developing personas, a male and a female persona, that they thought, sorry, slightly off topic, but it's made me think of it, but I can't remember what so they called these, and these people embodied everything that they wanted in a perfect agent, I guess, and it just brought some of the drier stuff to life. But I can't remember what they called it. No, unfortunately, it is normally just boring quality.
Yeah, but I'm the same, Rachel. It tends to be QA, and I think on the last point, the having the setup with the sampling, and it's all about providing targeted, focused agent coaching, and whatever your QA system, if it leads to that outcome, it's going to be successful. If it doesn't, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah, but I think Frank's right there. The coaching bit, if you have the choice between spending time scoring or coaching, then I would spend your time coaching, because that's what makes it.
So Charlie's asked, what is the minimum percentage of calls/emails to monitor to ensure you're getting a fair or accurate score? So if they took 100 calls, how many would you monitor? And do you then scale those volumes up? Frank, I don't know, from your opinion.
I mean, I have an opinion. The more calls that you are able to monitor, the more holistic and fair that feedback would be to the agents. However, it's in a manual environment, it's very difficult to achieve scale. I think Duncan with his would say that 7.7% is a number that gives you plus or minus 10%. So I guess in that case, Duncan, 8 calls would give you a plus or minus 10% degree of accuracy.
Well, yeah, it does vary. It depends on. Sorry, I know those initial examples are, they need to be quite specific to make the stats work. But it depends on the time that you're scoring these over. It depends on the how many points there are on your scale. So if you've got a 2-point, a yes/no scale, then it's you don't need to do so many. But then you can argue whether actually having a yes/no scale is actually giving you any value anyway.
And there was an interesting discussion in the chat room. INSAF had said our calls are on average 16 minutes long, and we have over 200 people to be monitored. I think Charlie did some quick calculations and said that's 1,280 hours of monitoring. So that's quite a high overhead, I guess, unless you can put some technology behind it.
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and it's just not practical. I remember, 10 years ago, proposing a manual quality system for somebody, and it in order to get the level of granularity that you needed for agent scoring, it's just hugely uneconomic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes broadly, 2 to 3 times the call length, perhaps the audio length, to do the assessment. So if you wanted to get 50% monitoring in a manual environment, and it's going to take you twice as long to score the calls as the calls last, you need as many assessors as you have agents. It's simply manual monitoring is simply not scalable.
Yeah, unless yes, sorry, I would agree at an agent level. Absolutely. If you can ask the question slightly differently, how effective is or how good are my emails overall? Then, as I said earlier, you can change the rules. Sample rules change slightly. So if you've got you want to take a month's worth of emails and pull 400 out of that, that will give you an idea of overall how your operation is doing, but not
at a business level, definitely. If you want to be using QA for agent coaching and performance improvement, you need a lot of assessors to replicate the manual model.
And Rachel, I think we've got time for one more tip or opinion in this section.
Yeah, somebody called Training Manager said he works in an outsourced call center, so have a number of different clients. We have a generic scorecard, but can be customized if needed. There are 2 sides to our quality monitoring, agent-specific and client-specific.
I perhaps will touch on that in my piece, Rachel, actually, about using scoring the agents against the attributes, qualities, or expectations of the consumer. And so perhaps I'll pick up on that one.
Indeed.
Well,
Duncan talked about, thank you very much for that, Rachel. Duncan had talked about different channels, synchronous and asynchronous. So we're asking the question of you in the chat room, if you'd just like to share how different is your QA approach between phone and the digital channels of email, web chat, or indeed social media for those. So if you'd just like to share your thoughts of how different the QA approach is between those channels, it'd be fascinating to see how they tie out. Just like to pass the baton across now to Frank Sherlock. And Frank, if you'd like to share your ideas about how technology can help the whole quality process. So let's just pass the baton across to you.
I shall share my screen. Let me know that you're when you're seeing my screen.
We can. Just need to go full screen.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you. And I know everyone's got choices of how they spend their time, and in today's world, everyone is always really busy. So I really do appreciate you choosing to either spend your time on the webinar live or listen to the recording. It's much appreciated. And thanks, Duncan, for your fascinating and insightful presentation. So a little bit about CoreMiner. CoreMiner are an interaction analytics company. So we provide software solutions to enable our customers to analyze the customer engagement and use that analysis to improve agent monitoring and performance feedback. We have a range of products for the post-call analysis, which typically is next day analysis, so the analysis tomorrow of today's calls, or real time, where we're actually providing the agents and associates with next best action and in-call advice. We have offices in the US, in Australasia, and in the UK. So I'm going to build this out very quickly. I thought I'd just take 30 seconds for the uninitiated, how interaction analytics works in the case of speech in this case. Basically, the system ingests all of the interactions. In the case of speech, we would transcribe all of the speech into text and apply some acoustic measures against it, volumetric measures, for example. All of that transcription is then analyzed against pre-built categories, and we tag specific phrases, language, or patternation of phrases or languages within that transcript. We use that tagging in terms of frequency or volume to produce scores for each and every call, and then the insight is provided in digestible form to the agent, associates, team leaders, MI team, to allow them to feedback coaching insight to the agents. So and this is done for 100% of the interaction. So statistically, the feedback is going to be accurate, relevant, and personalized to the agent. So to build on, everyone on this call on this webinar is passionate about the contact center and the importance of the contact center to the organization. Put very simply, the contact center is by a large majority, your customer interactions happen within the contact center. Therefore, the ability to gather, gain, and take action on feedback and insight in terms of what is happening in the contact center is really important to drive the business processes, to identify areas for cost reduction, for sales improvement, for revenue improvement, and to drive end-to-end efficiency in the contact center. So really, if you think about interaction analytics, it really is about taking that unstructured data that happens within organizations. Speech and audio is very unstructured. Turning that unstructured data into structured data to provide feedback to improve business and agent performance. So my first idea really is about using analytics to measure what really matters to your customers. So organizations who are listening to the voice of the customer and then utilizing those insights are going to have a better chance of assuring that they're meeting customer expectations and also aligning the training needs of the agents to the appropriate metrics. So getting the customer expectation and the performance metrics in harmony. So on this slide here on the top, just taking typically service, sales, or financial type calls, what the customer's looking for in service is efficiency, is first call resolution, is politeness, is to be confident in the results. So how would you transpose that into how you should be looking at what measures you should be using in the contact center from speech analytics? And on the bottom there, you can see some of the common measures that you would apply. So having this ability to measure and communicate this degree of insight at scale and measuring, are we delivering against customer expectations? Are the metrics that we are using aligned with the customer expectations? And analytics will allow you to do that for your organization. Omnichannel, Duncan touched on Omnichannel earlier. The way customers choose to communicate with us has changed rapidly, and it continues to change at a pace. So add to that the proliferation of, say, home working, for example. So you've now got a very multi-skilled, multi-channel, and migratory, and perhaps geographically dispersed workforce. It's really complicated and expensive to really manage that environment without utilizing technology from a performance perspective. So on this, taking that theme a bit further, here we're depicting a common occurrence here. Duncan made, customers may use more than one channel to get fulfillment. So here's a multi-channel interaction with a customer. Analytics will allow you to map that customer journey against the criteria that matters to the customer, as I discussed a couple of slides ago, on different channels, and also to get the opportunity to understand what the best path is for that interaction, what the best agent behavior and skill sets are required in order to deal with that interaction to improve the customer experience. So my next idea is put your people, so it sounds common sense, put your people where the skills are most relevant to the customer and the channel. When you've got all these insights around customer behavior, customer experience, agent behavior, you can determine the best way to deliver that optimal outcomes. What is the best channel for an agent to operate on? Which agents are more appropriate to multi-channel? Which agents are more appropriate to single channel? If single channel, which channel? Is it text-based? Is it telephony? And even which environments work best? home office, in-sourced or outsourced agents against different channels and different types of calls. So one of the big challenges that we see about performance management is simply the time lag between an event giving rise to perhaps a performance feedback and the time when that feedback's given. It just takes, in simple terms, it takes too long. If it takes too long, the opportunities to improve performance closely to the time that that performance need is identified, you're going to lose that opportunity. As a result, that long feedback loop can lead to disengaged agents. It can lead to poor customer experience. Analytics really speeds that process up. Either real-time feedback or post-call feedback is delivered in a fraction of the time. So the time to intelligence and the time to feedback, remove that latency in that feedback loop using analytics. So my final idea, not surprisingly, is use analytics to deliver that quick and relevant feedback. Software, it's fair, it's consistent, it's objective, so the results it delivers will always be accurate and will always be consistent. So we recommend that use analytics to assess at scale. Let the system take the strain of that heavy lifting on core monitoring and automated scoring, and let your quality team become the coaching team for the agents and associates. And also, if possible, provide the feedback to the agents about how they are performing against the KPIs that have been set down for them by the organization. So, we believe in the ability to feedback to the agents in an automated manner how they're really performing. Helps with self-regulation, self-improvement, and gamification. So you've got a huge amount of data. There's a huge amount of data locked in all of these customer insights. My call to action really is, don't let that data go to waste. Don't let it sit on a shelf. Don't let it be unlocked. Don't let it be locked data. Unlock that data. When you do that, you will find you've got better quality in terms of the performance results. You've got better accuracy. You've got more relevant and bespoke coaching opportunities that you can give to the agents. And as a result, you're going to have a better customer experience, more engaged employees, and better business outcomes. So that's my 3 tips, Jonty.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Frank. There's some good points I think you've certainly raised in there. Certainly unlocking the data that you already have in the organization. I think there's a mine of information that we already have, so using that. And I think the point, Frank, you made about changing the quality team from being sort of a compliance team into much more of a coaching team, I think is really one of the key things. I think it ties in very nicely with Duncan's point about what we're trying to do is trying to change behaviours overall, and I think that will create a much nicer environment for all of our customers. Well, we've got a few.
Just one thing, George. I think that I absolutely agree, but the technology's there. It's affordable. It's cost effective. I'd say use it. And I did forget to mention that for those when you get a copy of the slides, there's a link in one of the slides to what I think is a relevant white paper on using analytics in an omnichannel world, which you're welcome to download by clicking on the link.
Excellent. And certainly if anyone would like a demonstration of the Call Miner software, there is a question in the post webinar survey, so just tick the box in there. So Rachel, what's been going on in the chat room?
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions, and I'm sure we won't make it through all of them, so I think we'll get the panel to answer them afterwards if we don't come to them. So Tom shared a tip, which is it's incredibly important to encourage self-assessment. It's easy to tell people what they're doing wrong, and most likely then they're not going to improve. Give your agents the chance to evaluate their calls and live chats, and they'll be able to find their flaws and will more likely try to rectify them in the future. They'll be more aware of how to improve if they evaluate themselves. That's the way to make them really focus and experience the customer service they provide from the outside point of view. Regular and constructive feedback session is key as well. Don't just tell your agents what you're doing wrong, make them understand why and how to develop and change. If they see that you're passionate about the customer service and their personal improvement, they're more likely to take to heart everything you've said. It's simple, but unfortunately a lot of people forget about it nowadays.
Wow. I absolutely 100% agree with that. That providing the agents with the ability to understand, how they are performing, whether it be on ownership, empathy, satisfaction, handle time, whatever it may be, are the attributes or measures that the organization's assessing them on, giving the agents a chance to see quickly how they are performing, and to take time to understand where they can improve and allow them to self-regulate. So we in Core Miner, we distill our analytics. It's not the domain of just the MI team. We provide the ability to actually push the analytics to the agent desktop and see how the agents can see how they're performing against their peer group, how they're performing against the best. So 100% agree with that sentiment.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's, sorry, I was just going to agree broadly on that. Yeah. And actually getting people to maybe focus on, so it sounded like a broken record, but focus on the outcome. So, everyone can approach something in their own way. So rather than actually telling them or being prescriptive about how you do something, say this is what I want you to achieve. So if you want to make your customers happy, how you go about that is up to you, as long as the end result is a happy customer. So it's just it's a very different way of looking at things, which I think is good.
Thank you. So Fran shared her tip, which is colleague calibration sessions work really well. Healthy discussions about what's good and bad looks like, as well as encouraging healthy debate. We find feedback can be more powerful from a peer, and sharing of top tips is great. And Colleen said, I think this is, we had a question earlier about what to call your quality team, and she said, we call our QA I-quality, pointing to the fact that it's my responsibility, I am in control and drive the outcome, and the overall outcome is based on how I perform. It's all about realizing that my efforts and performance make a difference to the performance of the team as a whole. It gives the idea that everybody gets involved in the success of the organization. Frank, do you think that's a great one?
I do, yeah. Just coincidentally, we call one of our agent desktop product My Eureka. It's theirs, it's the agents, and quality isn't something that sits with the quality team, and the quality team are going to resolve all the problems. Having them sort of work groups, peer sessions, with or without the use of technology to enable them, is absolutely the right approach to take.
So Lars asked, impressed by 100% coverage, does Core Miner have any metadata that allows tying back interactions to customer post-contact surveys?
Very good question. In my haste of how technology, how it works, absolutely. The metadata provides you with the ability to analyze across multiple dimensions. So by agent, by team, by work group, by product, by account type, by service holding, etc., etc. So we would take the audio or the email or the web chat and its associated metadata and give an analysis against multiple dimensions using the metadata to determine which dimensions.
Okay. So Charlie's asked a question. How are you getting directors to sign off the QA resource time? As a contact center manager, I find it hard to get buy-in and therefore costs signed off for adequate QA resource. Duncan, I don't know if you've had any thoughts?
Yeah, it's there are always it's a perennial question, isn't it? There are always so many different aspects of an operation clamoring for the same budget, and as things get tighter, then you can't do anything. Sorry, you can't do everything. Is what I mean. You can't do everything that you would want to do within a contact center. But if QA is tied into performance improvement, if performance improvement gives a definable return on investment, but you do need to talk the right sort of language. I think if your directors are looking at those sort of metrics, and that's, you need to put the proposal into the sort of language that they understand.
Yeah, there is a nice return on investment calculator actually on CoreMiner's website. If anyone wants to visit the coreminer.com and look at a return on investment calculator for the analytics technology, they could see some. So, and it will. No, I'm not saying it. It's the answer to everything, but it will give you some of the sort of dimensions that need to be considered in performance and quality monitoring, and what some of the returns might be that might help people to convince the management team that the investment in quality is worthwhile if it's supported with technology.
Okay, we'll include that on our website then, Frank.
Yeah. Sure.
So Mike said, do your supervisors evaluate calls as well? And if so, do those scores count towards the supervisor's personal KPIs? I'm guessing that was more of a question in the chat room, but Duncan, I don't know what you thought on that.
Well, yeah. Again, I think it's a bit input focused, isn't it? Building someone's KPIs around what they do in terms of their scoring calls isn't the right thing, I don't think. As far as if your supervisor's KPIs should be around how well their teams perform, rather than necessarily ticking the box about evaluating the right number of calls, which would tend to drive the wrong sort of behaviour, I think.
So we've had a few more tips. We'll try and steamroller our way through them. So Paul's sent in a tip saying, create a scorecard that drives behaviour as opposed to a particular outcome for all the interaction. How effective was the information provided, and what was the strength of the conversation? We all know what a poor conversation looks like: unhelpful, lack of ownership, poor product knowledge, incorrect information. And be transparent with the agent for what behaviours the business is looking for, or what does good look like? How do we make it great?
No, absolutely. Crafting your forms around behaviour and trying to get people to behave better without necessarily focusing directly on the outcome, because doing something better will naturally drive the right outcome. Spot on, Paul 92.
He's actually sent an opinion which says, within the contact centre I lead, I encourage agents to submit their own calls for review, both in terms of aspects within the call they felt went well, along with areas of the call they felt that could improve, with the key point being moving away from a potential outcome of call monitoring being performance management / disciplinary to an opportunity for constant improvement. Frank?
I think it's a good idea. It is all about scale. At the end of the day, it still falls down to how many calls you need to assess, whether the agents are volunteering the calls to be assessed or whether they're being selected in some other manner. It still, I think, boils down to for accurate results for agent performance feedback and coaching. I would say technology is the answer, but it's not the only answer.
And I think we've got time for one more tip, Jonty, which is from Stephanie, who said, once you've identified the action focus area, listen to snippets of many calls that show this action focus area. This means that you can listen to multiple calls rather than just 3. Identify the trends to coach on, identify how well the advisor is achieving their action, and what more support is needed.
I think that's certainly a very good tip there. Thank you very much for monitoring the chat room there, Rachel. And we're just going to wrap up the webinar now. We've hit the top of the hour. Just a reminder, if you could help with our overall quality evaluation, which is in 1 or 2 words. If you could describe what did you like best about the webinar. You can also put that into our post-webinar survey as well would be great to see. If you want to watch the replay of today or share this with your team, I know a lot of the ideas are sort of quite interesting. Certainly the statistical point might be well worth watching again. That's on callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. We're going to pick the winning tip. So, and that is Tom's tip, that it's incredibly important to encourage self-assessment. So, Tom, there's either a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates coming out to you. So we'll get in touch with you after and see what your preference is. Just a reminder, next week we're going to be looking at the increasing the take-up of self-service. And I'd just like to say thank you very much to our two presenters, Duncan White, for joining us from Paris to Horizon 2. Thank you, Duncan.
Au revoir, tout le monde.
And also thank you to Frank Sherlock from Core Miner. Thank you.
Thank you, John T. Thank you, Duncan, and thank you, everybody.
Okay, and look forward to seeing you all next week. Thanks then. Bye-bye.
Bye.